on the contempt citation would follow. We are opening up our phone lines for your thoughts on the debate. The numbers on your screen, 202-585-3885 if you're a Republican. Democrats, it's 202-585-3886. Independents and others, 202-585-3887. Please mute your television when you call in, and if you have called into any C-SPAN program in the last 30 days, let others call in this afternoon. First up, we go to Eastchester, New York, and Ruth is on our Republican line. Hello, Ruth.
Yes.
You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. I am indeed disappointed to see that there is so much partisanship in issues that are so important for all of us. We have seen through history that there is nobody above the law, not even the president. We condemned a Republican president. We condemned a Democratic president. They may have been pardoned, but they lied. Nobody is above the law, neither the Attorney General or anybody. So this is something that we all have to understand, that when it is the point of truth, it is truth, nothing but the truth, and all the truth, and God help us. Thank you.
Our Capitol Hill producer, Annie Tin, reports from inside the House chamber that the 11 public galleries are pretty full with visitors. Looks like one gallery is filled with congressional aides. Next up on our independent line, Laura in Los Angeles.
Hello?
You're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to say I am so unbelievably disgusted by what Eric Holder has done. There's no doubt in my mind that he has lied and is trying to cover his own butt, really. Not only should he lose his job, but he should spend some time in jail. And as for President Obama invoking executive privilege regarding all this, he should be ashamed of himself. I'm an independent voter, and I voted for Obama, and I'm just so really upset about all this. And trust me, next time around, Obama will not be getting my vote, and Holder should be accountable for what he's done.
We are expecting to hear some reaction from Attorney General Holder. We hope to have that for you later on our program schedule. Here's Linda, also in California, Republican caller in Marysville. Linda, good afternoon. Linda in Marysville, California, make sure you mute your TV and go ahead with your comments.
Yes, I'm really disturbed over this because it's been a while since I've had the opportunity to sit and watch the Congress in doing what we sent them there to do. And I cannot believe that they are wasting their time. This is the same body that sent thousands and thousands of young men and women to war over lies and deceit. And where was the outrage? Where's the outrage now? That one border guard, and we all know that when you're in law enforcement, you are subject to being hurt. And, there's probably more school teachers die than border guards. But I just think that this just points out that our government is so broken. And
the first of two votes here, the motion on recommitting, referring this back to the committee, and the vote on the contempt citation itself is next. We go to Miami. Antonio is on our Democrats line. Antonio, mute your television. Make sure you mute your television, and please proceed. I'm going to put you on hold there, Antonio. Louise is in Bristol, Connecticut. She's on our Democrats line as well. Louise, Bristol, Connecticut. Hello.
Yes.
I'm going to put you on hold. Make sure you mute your television when you call in, or you're going to feedback and confuse yourself and everybody else. The Associated Press is reporting this afternoon that emails by Attorney General Eric Holder from early 2011 expressed the need to get to the bottom of allegations that the Operation Fast and Furious, of the tactics used in Fast and Furious. They report that in the early days of the controversy, two of Eric Holder's emails, and one by Deputy Attorney General James Cole, expressed growing concern that something might have gone wrong in the flawed federal gun smuggling probe. And that from the Associated Press. Let's get back to Antonio, Miami, on our Democrats line. Antonio, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead with your comments.
Yes, sir. I'm a Cuban American being in America 50 years. I've been seeing and heard about everything, but I never heard such a thing like they all got out there. Those Republicans are doing and boycotting everything that the Democrats are trying to do. Everything out there is everything. I don't doubt that these people, this 50 or 75% of the Republicans built up all this and everything they building up all the way from the beginning to the end, because they know they got nobody to be a president. That one is going to go to president. He is not good. He is worse than the worst one. What about they didn't do anything when President Bush created 2 wars, and then that's why we are so deep in hell. Excuse me, but that's the way I feel and the way I see.
Let's go to our Republican line, Connor in New York City. Connor in New York City, go ahead with your comments.
Yeah, quick comment. I think it's quite ironic that Attorney General Eric Holder, who called us a nation of cowards in a famous speech of his, is totally epitomizing the Democrats who are voting no on this motion right now. And to bring up that this is a racial vote or that it's precluded only because of racial tendencies is fitting of his speech. He should look back and reflect on what he had said before and actually carry this conversation with those who vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Louise, Bristol, Connecticut, on our Democrats line. Hi there. Let's go to San Diego on our Independents line. Sarah.
Hi, this is Sarah from California calling.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm surprised that nobody is bringing up the fact that the documents in question would be illegal to hand over, and I'm really disturbed by the fact that it's being put in a different light than that. Apparently grand jury information is not legal to actually be put in front of Congress. Further disturbing is the fact that Mukasey, the AG under Bush, has not been subpoenaed for his testimony, which flies in the face of Gowdy's statement that he wants the whole truth. And furthermore, ISA suggesting that no one called back from an office regarding Terry is pretty hypocritical in that I've contacted several representatives, and Mr. Isa, who happens to be my representative, is the only individual who requires a pre-printed form filled out requiring your social security number and your date of birth in order to get a request for response of information from that office. So I think we need to take a deep breath and really look to what's really going on and what the full level of truth in this matter is.
C-SPAN cameras have covered many of the hearings held by Darrell Issa's committee, the Oversight Committee, in addition to the Judiciary Committee dealing with Fast and Furious, and you will find those in our video library at cspan.org. To our Republican line, Albert is in New Hampshire. Welcome. New Hampshire, hello. Albert? Democrat. You go ahead with your thoughts, sir.
No, this is Bob from Cincinnati.
Okay, Bob, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just find it completely amazing that you can get a former Speaker of the House on the floor of Congress talking, basically making this into more of a racial issue, talking about the rule of law, talking about expounding on how in 200 years it's unprecedented. I think what's unprecedented is that you have an Attorney General that refuses to comply over an 18-month period, and, you know, we're supposed to sit back and basically do nothing and let him slide.
For the first of 2 votes here on the House floor. This is a vote on the motion to referring the resolution back to the committee, the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. It's a 15-minute vote, and then the vote on the contempt citation itself. And we are likely to see a significant number of Democrats walk off the floor in protest in that vote. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus, the Hispanic, Asian Pacific American, and Progressive caucuses all plan to walk off during that vote, and we also expect some video coverage of that as well. A couple more calls here. Terrell's in St. Louis on our Democrats line. St. Louis, hello.
Yes, sir.
Terrell,
Hello?
go ahead. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Yeah, I'm voicing my opinion for the Democratic. Can you hear me?
We certainly can. Go ahead.
Okay, I really think it's time for all the Republicans, all the old ideas. It's time for all that to change. This is a new world, and they're still stuck in 1888 politics. Let's move on. That's all I have to say.
Independent line next to Vandalia, Michigan. And this is Bob. Bob on our independent line. Hi.
Hello?
You're on the air.
Yeah. Well, I'm just appalled how these Republicans are conducting themselves. For one thing, they got a bunch of them stand up and saying that the government bought guns and let them go. Nobody has any proof whatsoever that anybody in the government bought guns and let them go across the border. And so why is it against the law? How come something can't happen? These people stand up and just lie. That's what I want to know. I mean, they just stand there lying through their teeth when they say this and say that, but they have no evidence of it. And that's all I got to say about it.
Republican line, Tim in Pennsylvania. What are your thoughts?
I'm appalled at the way that the government and the judicial system thinks they're above the law. This country, which was a great country at one time, has really went downhill. And until we get things turned around, we will never, ever be able to resolve the issues like this Eric Holder thing. I mean, it is completely appalling that he thinks he's above the law, but yet the judicial system and the House, both the Republicans and the Democrats, need to stick on this thing, and they need to make it go through. If it was a regular person, you can bet your hind end they'd have done went to jail. Thank you.
Just a couple of related programming notes. We expect to hear some comments from the Attorney General. We'll have that video for you shortly, later in our program schedule. I also want to let you know that in regards to the Supreme Court decision today, the 5-4 decision upholding the majority of the President's health care law, the 2010 law, we have lots of video of that reaction from members of Congress and others, and all of that will get underway after our House coverage this evening here on C-SPAN. To Los Angeles next on our Democrats line, Susan. Susan in Los Angeles, go ahead. Susan in California, hi.
Hi. Yes, I'd like to make a comment that I've been following this case for a long time now, and yesterday I felt like I was educated for the first time with facts. And there was an article published by Fortune yesterday. It's by an investigative journalist named Catherine Eben, and I'll just read the initial sentence. If a Fortune investigation reveals that the ATF never intentionally allowed guns to fall into the hands of Mexican drug cartels, how the world came to believe just the opposite is a tale of rivalry, murder, and political bloodlust. And when you read this article, which is an extensive article, you come away really understanding what happened. You understand that Eric Holder and the Justice Department are not at fault in this case, on how the truth has not been told to the public by Darrell Issa and his committee. And I encourage all Republicans, Independents, and Democrats to look this up on the Internet. The article is called The Truth About the Fast and Furious Scandal. It was published yesterday, June 27th, and the author is Catherine Eben.
And we have linked to that article. Thank you, Susan in California. The article she was referring to, we have linked to that from our website, cspan.org. You'll see a lot of our coverage regarding the Attorney General story, and the link to that article is right there. Jay is in New Jersey, and he's on our Republican line. Welcome. Hello, Jay. Are you there?
I'm here ready to go.
Then you're on the air, sir.
Okay, I think marijuana should be legalized, which would probably eliminate a good portion of what's going on here. And the ballyhoo and rigmarole that Congress is putting the American people through should be rectified by firing them all. Thank you.
Let's get one more call here. Go ahead, caller, on our Democrats line. Where are you calling from?
from New York.
All right, go ahead with your comments.
Yes. Hello?
We are on the air, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. I don't understand why this is such an issue when the contractors, the private contractors that electrocuted our soldiers in Iraq were never investigated. Why is one dead ATF agent enough to spend all this money over? It's obviously just for political convenience. It's nothing there. They know nothing happened. They simply want to fish through documents to find anything that they can to tar the president and the attorney general.
The vote on the contempt citation will be coming up next after this vote on a motion to refer, and expected during that 5-minute vote on the contempt citation, a number of Democrats expected to walk out. We'll see that shortly. While we wait for that, we wanted to show you some of the comments from the House floor from Speaker Boehner and also from the Democratic whip, Steny Hoyer.
It's important for the American people to know how we got here and to know the facts of this case. The Congress asked the Justice Department for the facts related to the Fast and Furious and the events that led to the death of U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. The Justice Department did not provide the facts and the information that we requested. Instead, the information came from people outside the department, people who wanted to do the right thing. In addition to not providing the information, the administration admitted misleading Congress, actually retracting a letter it had sent 10 months earlier. I think all the members understand this is a very serious matter. The Terry family wants to know how this happened, and they have every right to have their answers. And the House needs to know how this happened. And it's our constitutional duty to find out. So the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee issued a lawful and narrowly tailored subpoena. We've been patient, given the Justice Department every opportunity to comply so that we can get to the bottom of this for the Terry family. We've shown more than enough good faith, but the White House has chosen to invoke executive privilege. That leaves us no other options. The only recourse left for the House is to continue seeking the truth and to hold Attorney General in contempt of Congress. Now, I don't take this matter lightly, and I would frankly hope it would never come to this. The House's focus is on jobs and on the economy. But no Justice Department is above the law, and no Justice Department is above the Constitution, which each of us has sworn an oath to uphold. So I ask the members of this body to come together and to support this resolution so that we can seek the answers that the Terry family and the American people deserve. Now yield back.
House Speaker John Boehner speaking earlier in support of the resolution recommending that the House find Eric Holder, the Attorney General, in criminal contempt of Congress for failure to turn over specific documents to the Oversight and Government Reform Committee.
On this vote, the yeas are 172, the nays are 251, and the motion is not agreed to. The question is on adoption of the resolution. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Objection, the motion For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
I ask for a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested. Those in favor of request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will control their vote by electronic device. It's a 5-minute vote.
This is the vote on the resolution recommending that the House fine Eric Holder in contempt, criminal contempt, for failure to turn over specific documents related to the Fast and Furious gun operation. What you're seeing is a large number of Democrats leaving the House chamber, heading off the floor, in an email that came out a short while ago, just emphasizing what we had told you earlier from the Congressional Black Caucus, that members are advised that the Democratic leader and Democratic whip intend to walk out and not vote on H.Res. 711. Members are urged to join them in walking out with the Congressional Black Caucus. It's a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 255, the nays are 67, one member voting present. The resolution is agreed to. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The House will be in order. What are we doing now? Okay, we got that. Where's my...
House will be in order. House will be in order. House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 708, I call up House Resolution 706.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 706, Resolution authorizing the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to initiate or intervene in judicial proceedings to enforce certain subpoenas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 708, the resolution is considered read. The gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, each will control 10 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman's correct. The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Speaker. I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Lundgren.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, we've just had a very important vote, and some would ask what this second vote is about. This second vote is a simple authorization for the committee involved to be able to essentially hire counsel that would allow us to go into court to seek a declaratory judgment by the federal court to enforce the subpoenas that have been presented by this committee to the Attorney General of the United States. It's a simple, straightforward resolution. Why is it important? One of our obligations under the Constitution is to provide oversight of the executive branch. There are those in this body who have been here and engaged in debate with respect to important items such as the Patriot Act and FISA. And one of the things we have attempted to assure our constituents was that we would ensure that the constitutional rights of Americans would not be trampled upon as we carry out the appropriate responsibility of protecting this country and our constituents against terrorist attack. That requires us to provide active oversight over the executive branch. Similarly, in this case, we have an obligation to stand in the shoes of those we represent, to oversee the operations of the executive branch, in this case the Department of Justice, to ensure that they are following the law. One manner in which that can be frustrated is by a department, in this case the Department of Justice, that refuses to respond to lawful subpoenas and give us the information so that we can do that oversight. That is what we were talking about. This Congress, this House of Representatives, was misled. I don't know whether it was intentional or not. I do know we were misled by a representation from the Justice Department in official response to an inquiry by the Congress of the United States. That was not corrected for 10 months. You can look at it a couple of ways. One is that there was an attempt to slow walk the Congress so that it could not carry out its constitutional responsibility. There is a lot of talk on this floor by both Democrats and Republicans as to how we have an obligation to oversee the executive branch. In fact, one of the genius points of our Founding Fathers' Constitution is that conflict between or among the three branches of government, that natural tension. But that natural tension cannot exist, and we cannot do that which we are called upon under the Constitution to do faithfully if we are denied information to oversee the operations of the Department of Justice. All we are doing...
I'd ask the gentleman to have an additional 30 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for 30
seconds.
So
all we are doing simply is asking the authorization so that this committee can have the representation of counsel to see that these subpoenas are carried out. Since we have been given every sense from the Justice Department that it would be folly, in a sense, to suggest that they would carry out the actions that we just voted upon against the Attorney General. This is the method by which we can achieve that which we are required to do, that is to carry out oversight responsibility against the Executive Department, including the Department of Justice.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton.
The gentlelady from the District of Columbia is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I have come back from walking out of this proceeding to address the serious, baseless charge of cover-up. No one in the majority has been able to charge that the Attorney General or his top lieutenants knew about the gun walking initiated in the Bush administration, because there is no evidence of that after 16 months of investigation. This contempt resolution stems from a letter from the department correcting the record, that the record from a letter written in the legislative affairs part of the Justice Department that there was no gun walking. That letter relied on statements of ATF officials and Justice Department officials who this Justice Department then fired and did its own investigation. Then what you have is contempt for correcting the record. This is the opposite of a cover-up, but it is alleged. If the department has nothing to hide, it would simply turn over everything in its possession. The other side has gone so far as to say that when the president invoked executive privilege, he too was implicated in a cover-up. But the Supreme Court itself has said that while the privilege is not absolute, and here I am quoting, human experience teaches that those who expect public dissemination of their remarks may well temper candor with concern for appearances. Thus, presidents have repeatedly asserted executive privilege to protect confidential executive branch deliberative materials from congressional subpoena. The last leg of this weak read of contempt is, could I have another 30 seconds?
Grant the lady additional 30 seconds.
Lady's recognized.
Is that the president asserted executive privilege too late. Why not from the beginning? The president, like every president before him, did not assert the privilege until negotiations broke down, but the committee proceeded without even examining the basis for the privilege, as prior chairs have done. It is the most irresponsible allegation of this debate because no evidence for cover-up has been submitted. This subpoena is so partisan and political that I expect any court to do just what our committee should have done, to compel the parties to sit down to negotiate.
The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's amazing that people would say there's no evidence of a cover-up when somebody says, no, we didn't do what we did, and then hides it for an additional 10 months. By any normal American standard, that would be a cover-up. With that, I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, for 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in support of the motion for for civil contempt, so we can get an attorney to proceed. Normally, under contempt, what happens is we vote like we just did to hold someone in contempt, and it's turned over to the Department of Justice, in fact, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, to pursue in district court. Unfortunately, the U.S. Attorney is an employee and reports to the Attorney General, who is just found in contempt, and we are concerned, I am concerned, that past history of stonewalling and delays that are associated with getting us information and cooperating with us on Fast and Furious will continue, and in fact, there will be no prompt prosecution of the contempt resolution we just voted out. So it is absolutely critical that the committee be given the authority to pursue this on their own
known if the Justice Department is not responsive. I therefore urge all of my colleagues to join me in support of this civil contempt resolution, and I'll yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland.
Yield to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. The contempt citation pending against Attorney General Holder is unfounded, unfair, and unwise. All of this involves questions about gun walking, and we know that the Attorney General has handed over thousands of documents in response to multiple subpoenas. And so we know that the gun walking policy began under the Bush administration. We know that President Bush's Attorney General, Michael McCasey, was briefed on the policy, and it continued. We know that the Attorney General Holder, when he found out about it, he shut the program down and called for an investigation. If we want to know why the policy started, we should ask officials who served when it started during the Bush administration. If we want to know what Attorney General Holder knew about Fast and Furious, we should call former acting director of the ATF, Ken Melson, who was on record saying that he would have been the one to have informed the Attorney General, but even he didn't know about Fast and Furious. But unfortunately, requests from the Democratic members of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to call these witnesses have been rejected. At this point, there's been no articulation of any useful information about the origins of gun walking in Fast and Furious or the death of Agent Brian Terry that can be learned from the narrow set of documents still at issue. Nor has there been any articulation of any legitimate legislative purpose that can be achieved. In fact, Chairman Issa has silenced whistleblowers who testified about legislation to strengthen law enforcement tools on the southwestern border. The Speaker now insists on holding Attorney General Holder in contempt for failing to respond to more subpoenas. The Speaker should articulate with clarity what legitimate purpose should be served by the response. If nothing legitimately useful is to be learned, nor any legislative purpose to be achieved with the continued response to these subpoenas, then it's time for the Attorney General to get back to work along with the members of the House. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if I heard the gentleman right when he said that I silenced whistleblowers in order to keep them from talking about gun control. If there's a gentleman disparaging and falsely claiming that I did something that I know for a fact I did not.
The gentleman yield?
Of course.
I'll tell you what you did. When you called the whistleblowers in, and the whistleblowers who were ATF agents, and you know this.
Reclaiming my time.
I'm answering your question.
Reclaiming my time.
The gentleman from California controls the time.
Reclaiming my time. It's pretty clear you're disparaging me. And you're disparaging me by making a claim that's untrue. The bottom line is, in committee, witnesses were told that they need not answer questions that were not the subject of the hearing. And in fact, those witnesses were allowed and did answer questions by the minority having to do with gun control, an issue they prefer to talk about rather than the cause of Brian Terry's death. And with that, I'd recognize the gentleman from Texas for 2 minutes.
Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, as a former federal prosecutor at the Department of Justice, I do not take these proceedings lightly. Above all, those at the Department cherish their integrity. But, Mr. Speaker, that integrity has now been impugned. This is not about politics. It's about pursuit of the truth and justice. The definition of contempt is a willful disobedience to or open disrespect for the rules of orders of a court or legislative body. This definition falls squarely within the facts here. When insiders revealed the government's role in Operations Fast and Furious, the Department of Justice falsely told Congress that whistleblowers weren't telling the truth. And as Congress fulfilled its oversight obligations and tried to get to the bottom of how guns were illegally put in the hands of Mexican drug cartels, ultimately killing Border Patrol Agent Brian Terry, this administration refused to turn over crucial documents that would shed light on this. Instead, they asserted the executive privilege at the 11th hour, really calling into question the validity of the privilege itself, and at the same time demonstrating that communications were held at the highest levels in the government. In fact, the wiretaps we all know who have worked at the department are approved at Maine Justice. Mr. Speaker, this Attorney General needs to be held accountable. The Terry family, the families of the Mexican people who have been slain and killed, and the American people deserve no less. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland.
I yield to Mr. Reyes, 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is indeed a sad day today, and as an officer that spent 26.5 years wearing the United States Border Patrol uniform, it is regrettable for me today that we're here under these circumstances. I want to acknowledge and thank the chairman and the ranking member for inviting me to go with them to Mexico City and visit the U.S. Embassy about the circumstances around what led to the investigation of Fast and Furious. And to me, it's regrettable because we are here discussing the death of a Border Patrol agent. I went to the memorial service for Agent Brian Terry. I visited with his mom and his family that day. I went there because as a former Border Patrol agent, I wanted to express sympathy and support, as I did so many times as a chief, for agents that were killed in the line of duty. So for me, it is particularly troubling that we're here politicizing the death of a United States Border Patrol agent. We ought to be about getting to the circumstances of the investigation led under a U.S. attorney under OCDEF. Both the ranking member and the chairman know that that was the controlling entity in this case. I don't know except to say that it's pure basic politics that we've now spun this up to the level of the Attorney General. Having had the experience to supervise my agents that were part of OCDEF investigations, and having had a number of conversations with my friends on the other side of the aisle who were experienced prosecutors, everybody here that has that experience knows that those controls don't go up to the level of the Attorney General except after the case.
30 seconds.
Just for 30 seconds.
Thank you. Don't go up to the level of the Attorney General. So we're here taking a lot of time when we should be discussing things that are a priority to the American people. We're here under the worst of circumstances for the Terry family, who all they want is closure on the death of a son, on the death of a patriotic American citizen, and spinning it in a political sense. I really think that this is a sad day for this House of Representatives, and we ought to do better for the American people. And I yield back the balance.
Time of the gentleman's expired. The gentleman from California.
At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Labrador.
The gentleman from Idaho is recognized for 1 minute.
Get more if you need it.
I'm good. Mr. Speaker, once again I sit here and I'm amazed by the language that is being used. We've had numerous hearings, we've had numerous investigations, we've had a lot of people come before Congress and give us false information. And the reality is that I hear again and again from the other side is that there is no evidence of cover-up. There is no evidence of cover-up. But the reality is that we have only received 5% of the documents that we have requested. There is no way for us to know exactly what happened, who knew, when, and what did they know, unless we receive all of the documents. All we're asking the Attorney General to do is to provide the documents that we have requested. We wouldn't be standing here holding these contempt proceedings if he had given us the documents, and that's why I ask everybody in this body to actually vote for contempt. Thank you very much.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland.
May I inquire as to how much time is left?
The gentleman from Maryland has 3 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from California has 1 minute and 3/4 remaining.
Will reserve.
Gentleman from Maryland.
Reserving the right to close. I have no more speakers.
Right. Very well.
Does the gentleman from Maryland wish to be recognized?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, the You know, it's interesting here today what we just did with regard to the criminal contempt. I do believe that it is very unfortunate, and let me tell you why. We have an Attorney General who is indeed an honorable man. We who practice law look up to the Attorney General and any U.S. attorney. They are folks like us who are well educated and who love their country. And Eric Holder Jr. is no exception. Over and over again, he has tried to cooperate with this committee. And I'm sure that both sides, his side and our side, have become a little frustrated at times. But as he said in a meeting a few weeks ago, about a couple weeks ago, he said that he's willing to give the documents, but he was asking that at some point his attorneys have an opportunity to get back to work. Now, Leader Pelosi said something a moment ago that we should not lose sight of, Mr. Speaker, when she spoke about the Constitution and that it requires Congress and executive branch to avoid unnecessary conflict and to seek accommodations that serve both of their interests. In the words of Attorney General William French Smith when he said, and of course he was under President Reagan, it is our obligation, it is the obligation of each branch to make a principled effort to acknowledge and, if possible, to meet the legitimate needs of the other branch. I believe that this Attorney General has bent over backwards trying to accommodate us, trying to provide the information, but at the same time, as he has said to us many times, to protect the institution of the Attorney General of the United States. And when I say protect the institution, I mean protect the institution. Same types of things that have been subjects of assertions of executive privilege, making sure that wiretap applications are not made public, making sure that confidential informants are not disclosed, making sure that ongoing investigations are not interfered with. And I'm not sure, but maybe something that happened, we're not sure, we're checking on it, happened in this House already today, may have been interfered with the trial already. And so, as I close, I would submit that he has done the very best that he could, and now we need to meet him halfway.
The gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute, 1 3/4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been a long day for America, but it's been a longer day for the Terry family. I'm going to urge everyone to vote for this ability to hire counsel, and that's what the last vote is, and I believe it will pass overwhelmingly. But I'm going to use this time to pledge to the American people, to pledge to the Terry family, and to pledge to my colleagues. This investigation has in fact been brought to a halt in one area, and the area is the Attorney General's flat refusal to any longer cooperate with this committee. But it doesn't change the fact that in the days and weeks to come, we will use what we can in the way of other tools, including some of the individuals that the minority has talked about today, to glean additional information, to find ways to prove accountability for the many people that had to be involved in this OCDEF operation in order for those guns to walk. We will continue to do that. We will try to find the truth. Hopefully, in the weeks to come, we also will begin getting cooperation from the administration again. But if we don't, I will tell the ranking member here today, it has always been my intention to look backwards to previous gun walking or programs that we believe were certainly poorly designed and resulted in weapons getting out of the hands of lawful people and into the hands of criminal elements. That's not going to change. It's not going to change because it's our obligation to investigate, and because this one we cannot let loose until the Terry family has been kept a promise that the ranking member and I both made. So I take the ranking member at his word today that, in fact, he will not rest until we get them answers, and I commit the same that I will not, and I urge the passage of this resolution.
Gentleman's time has expired. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 708, the previous question is ordered on the resolution. Those